15-second hook. He was called lazy. Teachers had given up on him. Even his own parents had stopped asking about his future. But one quiet meeting with a disciplined stranger changed everything. This is not just a story. This is proof that discipline can completely change your life. He woke up late again. The sunlight was already spilling through the thin curtains, cutting across the messy room like it was judging him. Clothes lay scattered on the floor. Books were piled in the corner, untouched, their covers dusty, their pages unread. His phone buzzed on the bed beside him, showing missed calls and messages he didn't want to open. His name was Ethan. Ethan was 21 years old, a college student in name only. In reality, he had stopped being a student a long time ago. He attended classes only when he felt guilty enough. Most mornings he slept through alarms. Most nights, he stayed awake scrolling endlessly, watching videos, telling himself he would start studying tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. He slowly sat up on the bed, rubbing his face. His head felt heavy, not from lack of sleep, but from something deeper. Quiet, constant weight. Hopelessness. Another day wasted, he muttered to himself. He reached for his phone and checked his email. There it was. The message he had been avoiding for weeks. Academic warning. Final notice. His heart tightened. He didn't need to open it. He already knew what it said. His grades were terrible. He had failed multiple courses. One more semester like this, and he would be expelled. Ethan dropped the phone back onto the bed and stared at the ceiling. "When did I become like this?" he whispered. He remembered being a child, curious and full of energy. He remembered teachers praising him, telling his parents he was smart. Somewhere along the way, that boy disappeared, replaced by someone tired, distracted, and stuck. Downstairs, he could hear his parents moving around. The clinking of dishes, the low hum of conversation. He knew what would happen if he went down. His mother would look at him with concern. His father would ask the same question he always asked. "Did you go to class today?" Ethan hated that question. Not because it was unfair, but because it reminded him of everything he wasn't doing. He stayed in his room until the house grew quiet again. When he finally went downstairs, the breakfast table was empty. A plate sat on the counter, cold eggs and toast untouched. A note from his mother lay beside it. "We believe in you. Please believe in yourself." He crumpled the note in his hand. They shouldn't believe in me, he thought. I don't even believe in myself. That afternoon, Ethan forced himself to go to campus. Not to attend class, but because sitting alone at home felt worse. He walked slowly across the grounds, watching other students rush past him. Some laughed, some argued, some talked excitedly about exams, projects, plans. Everyone seemed to be moving forward. Except him. He sat on a bench near the old library, his backpack resting untouched at his feet. He stared at the ground, replaying the same thoughts over and over. "I'm lazy. I always quit. I can't change. Mind if I sit here?" The voice startled him. Ethan looked up. A man stood beside the bench. He appeared to be in his early 40s, wearing simple clothes. Nothing fancy. Clean sneakers, plain jacket. His posture was straight, calm, confident. Sure," Ethan replied, scooting over slightly. The man sat down, placing a small notebook beside him. For a moment they sat in silence. Then the man spoke again. "Rough day." Ethan gave a short laugh. "Rough life." The man smiled gently. "That bad, huh?" Ethan didn't know why, but something about the man's tone made him answer honestly. "I'm failing," Ethan said. "School, life, everything. I know what I should do, but I just don't do it." The man nodded, as if he had heard this many times before. "Let me guess," he said. "You wait for motivation." Ethan frowned. "Isn't that what everyone does?" The man shook his head. "No, that's what everyone thinks they do." Ethan looked at him more closely. "What do you mean?" The man picked up his notebook and flipped it open. The pages were filled with neat handwriting. List, check marks. My name is Daniel, he said. And I live by discipline, not motivation. Ethan almost laughed. Discipline? I don't have that. If I did, I wouldn't be sitting here. Daniel smiled again. I used to sit exactly where you are. That caught Ethan's attention. Daniel leaned back slightly, looking out at the campus buildings. When I was your age, I failed out of college. I was lazy, distracted, always making excuses. I blamed my teachers, my parents, the system. So what changed? Ethan asked quietly. Daniel tapped the notebook. Small habits, daily discipline. Ethan shook his head. I've tried big changes, schedules, plans. I never stick to them. That's because you aim too high at the start, Daniel replied. Discipline isn't about doing everything. It's about doing one small thing every day, whether you feel like it or not. Ethan looked skeptical. Like what? Daniel closed the notebook and looked him directly in the eyes. Like waking up at the same time every day. Studying for 20 minutes. Making your bed. Simple things. Boring things. That doesn't sound life-changing, Ethan said. Daniel chuckled. Neither does a single drop of water. But enough drops can carve stone. They sat quietly for a moment. Ethan felt something unfamiliar stirring inside him. Not excitement. Not motivation. Curiosity. What if I fail again? Ethan asked. What if I start and quit like always? Daniel stood up, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. Then you start again the next day. Discipline isn't about perfection. It's about returning. He took a pen from his pocket and tore a small piece of paper from the notebook. He wrote something on it and handed it to Ethan. Tomorrow. Wake up at 7 a.m. Study for 20 minutes. That's it. That's your only task, Daniel said. Nothing more. Ethan stared at the paper. Felt too simple. Almost stupid. And if I don't? Ethan asked. Daniel smiled. Then you'll stay exactly where you are. With that, Daniel walked away, leaving Ethan alone on the bench, holding the small piece of paper like it weighed 1,000 pounds. That night, Ethan lay in bed staring at the ceiling again. But this time his thoughts were different. 20 minutes, he thought. I can do 20 minutes. He set his alarm for 7 a.m. Then he hesitated. His finger hovered over the screen. He almost turned it off. Almost. Instead, he placed the phone down and closed his eyes. For the first time in a long while, Ethan didn't promise himself a better life. He promised himself one small disciplined action. And that made all the difference. Part 1. The alarm rang at exactly 7 a.m. Ethan didn't wake up immediately. His body reacted before his mind did. His hand reached out, searching blindly across the nightstand. The sound felt sharp, almost painful, cutting through the comfort of sleep. Just 5 more minutes, he mumbled, his eyes still closed. His finger hovered over the snooze button. Then he remembered the paper. Tomorrow. Wake up at 7 a.m. Study for 20 minutes. That's it. Daniel's calm voice echoed in his head. Discipline isn't about perfection. It's about returning. Ethan exhaled slowly and pulled his hand back. No, he whispered to himself. Just get up. He swung his legs off the bed and sat there for a moment, dizzy and uncomfortable. His room looked the same as always. Messy, uninviting. Chaotic, but something inside him felt different. Not better. Just awake. He stood up, made his way to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on his face. The shock sent a jolt through his system. He stared at his reflection in the mirror. His eyes looked tired, but there was a hint of something else behind them. Maybe hope. Or maybe stubbornness. Back in his room, he sat at his desk. The same desk he had avoided for months. He pulled out a textbook from his backpack and placed it in front of him. The cover felt heavier than it should have. 20 minutes, he said out loud. That's all. He set a timer on his phone and opened the book. The first 5 minutes were torture. His mind wandered constantly. He read the same sentence again and again without understanding it. His body felt restless. His phone buzzed with notifications, calling for his attention like a bad habit begging to be fed. "This is pointless," his mind whispered. "You're bad at this. You've always been bad at this." 10 minutes, he almost quit. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. The timer continued counting down, quietly, patiently. Daniel's words returned again. "Boring things." Ethan leaned forward and forced himself to read one more paragraph. Then another. When the timer finally rang, he jumped slightly. He looked at the screen. 200 hours completed. He blinked. "That's it," he said quietly. He hadn't suddenly become smarter. He didn't feel inspired. But something unexpected happened. He felt proud. Not the loud, exciting kind of pride. Quiet kind. The kind that settles in your chest and stays there. He closed the book, stood up, and made his bed. Not perfectly. Just enough. When he went downstairs, his mother was in the kitchen. She looked up surprised. "You're up early," she said gently. "Yeah," Ethan replied. "Just trying something." She smiled, not asking more. And for once that felt good. The rest of the day wasn't magical. Ethan still felt tired. He still struggled to focus in class. But something had shifted. He had kept a promise to himself. That night, he wrote something on a small sticky note and placed it on his desk. Day 1 done. The next morning the alarm rang again. This time it was harder. His body resisted. His mind complained louder. Every excuse felt more convincing. What's the point? You already did it once. Missing one day won't matter. Ethan stared at the ceiling, fighting an invisible battle. Then he sat up. "Just get up," he whispered again. Day 2 was worse than day 1. He studied for 20 minutes, but it felt longer. His concentration was weak. His mood was low. But when the timer rang, he didn't feel relief. He felt respect for himself. Days turned into a week. Ethan met Daniel again on the same bench outside the library. "You came back," Daniel said, smiling. "I didn't quit," Ethan replied. "Not yet, at least." Daniel nodded. "Good. How does it feel?" "Hard," Ethan admitted. "And boring." Daniel laughed softly. "Perfect." They talked for a while. Daniel didn't give long speeches. He asked questions. He listened. He suggested one more small habit. "Add 10 minutes of walking every day," Daniel said. "No music. No phone. Just walk." "That's it?" Ethan asked. "That's it," Daniel replied. Some days Ethan wanted more. He wanted to transform faster. He wanted results he could show. But discipline didn't work that way. Moved quietly, slowly, almost invisibly. After 2 weeks, something surprising happened. Ethan began waking up before his alarm. Not every day, but some days. His room started to look different. Less chaotic. More intentional. His desk became a place of work, not avoidance. His phone stayed face down more often. At college, his professors noticed. "You seem more focused lately," one of them said after class. Ethan didn't know how to respond. He just nodded. Inside, something warm spread through him. For the first time, he didn't feel like a failure pretending to be a student. He felt like a student becoming better. But discipline isn't a straight line. One night, Ethan stayed up late watching videos. He told himself he deserved it. The next morning he overslept. The alarm rang. He turned it off. "I'll restart tomorrow," he said. The whole day felt off. He skipped studying. He skipped walking. By evening, the familiar heaviness returned. "See, you're still the same." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stared at the sticky notes on his desk. Day 1, Day 2, Day 3. All the way to Day 14. Then he remembered something Daniel had said. Discipline isn't about perfection. It's about returning. Ethan sat up and picked up a pen. Day 15 restarted. The next morning, he woke up at 7 a.m. Not because he felt like it. Because that's who he was becoming. Part 2. The weeks passed quietly, almost unnoticed by anyone except Ethan. From the outside, nothing dramatic had changed. He still wore the same clothes. He still took the same bus to campus. He still sat in the back of the classroom most days. But inside him, something steady was forming, like a backbone he had never had before. Every morning at 7 a.m. the alarm rang. Some mornings were easy. Others felt like battles. There were days when his body felt heavy, when his mind tried to negotiate. You studied yesterday. You can skip today. But Ethan had learned something important. He didn't argue anymore. He didn't motivate himself with speeches or promises. He simply stood up. That was the discipline. 20 minutes of studying became non-negotiable. Not because he loved it, but because it was part of who he was becoming. On days when he felt focused, those 20 minutes flew by. On bad days they dragged painfully. Still he stayed. And then something unexpected happened. One morning when the timer rang, Ethan didn't close the book. He kept reading. Just 5 more minutes, he told himself. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 15. When he finally stopped, he looked at the clock and laughed quietly. That's new, he said to himself. He didn't write it down as a victory. Daniel had warned him about that. Don't chase excitement, Daniel had said during one of their walks. Chase consistency. So Ethan didn't celebrate. He simply showed up again the next day. Midterms arrived faster than he expected. In the past, exams had filled Ethan with dread. He used to avoid thinking about them until the night before, when panic would set in and keep him awake. This time felt different. Not easy. Different. Sitting at his desk the night before his first exam, he opened his notebook and realized something shocking. I actually know this, he whispered. Not everything, but enough. In the exam hall, his hand still shook slightly as he filled in his name. The room was silent except for the scratching of pens. Ethan took a deep breath and began. When the exam ended, he didn't feel confident. But he didn't feel ashamed either. That alone felt like progress. A week later, the results were posted online. Ethan stared at the screen, his heart pounding. He hadn't failed. It wasn't a perfect score. It wasn't even impressive. But it was a pass. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. I did this, he said softly. That evening he met Daniel again. They walked slowly through a quiet park, leaves crunching beneath their feet. I passed, Ethan said. Daniel smiled. Good. That's it. Ethan asked, surprised. You're not going to say anything else? Daniel stopped walking and looked at him. Passing isn't the victory. Becoming disciplined is. Ethan nodded. He was beginning to understand. But life has a way of testing new habits. Around the 3rd month, things got harder. Assignments piled up. One of Ethan's close friends dropped out of college and moved back home, bitter and angry. His parents started arguing more about money. Sleep became harder again. One morning, Ethan woke up feeling empty. Not tired. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. The alarm had already been turned off. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I don't care today, he thought. What's the point of all this effort? He didn't study that morning. The day felt heavy. He skipped classes. He ate junk food. By evening, guilt settled in his chest like a familiar old friend. That night he didn't meet Daniel. He avoided the park. He avoided his desk. He avoided his thoughts. The next morning was worse. Ethan stayed in bed until noon. By the afternoon, the old voice was back. See, this was temporary. You're still lazy. You always will be. Ethan sat alone in his room, staring at the sticky notes still lined up on his desk. His chest felt tight. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Haven't seen you in a few days. Everything okay? Ethan stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Messed up. Missed 2 days. Feels pointless now. The reply came a few minutes later. Meet me at the bench. When Ethan arrived, Daniel was already there, sitting quietly. He didn't smile this time. They sat in silence for a while. "I failed again," Ethan said finally. "No," Daniel replied calmly. "You paused. What's the difference?" Ethan asked bitterly. "The difference," Daniel said, "is what you do next." Ethan clenched his fists. "I hate that this is so hard. Other people just do things." Daniel nodded. "They don't. They struggle quietly. You're just honest about it." Daniel leaned forward. "Listen to me carefully. Discipline doesn't mean you never fall. It means you don't turn a fall into an identity." Ethan looked down at his hands. "You're not lazy," Daniel continued. "You were untrained. There's a difference." Those words hit deeper than Ethan expected. Untrained. Not broken. Not hopeless. Just untrained. "Go home," Daniel said gently. "Wake up tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Study for 10 minutes. 10? Ethan asked. Daniel smiled slightly. "Returning is harder than starting. Make it easier." That night, Ethan didn't sleep much. But for a different reason than before. His mind replayed Daniel's words again and again. Untrained. At 7 a.m. the alarm rang. Ethan sat up immediately. 10 minutes, he whispered. He sat at his desk. He opened his book. He set the timer. The 10 minutes passed slowly, but when the timer rang, Ethan felt something powerful. Relief. Not relief from studying. Relief from quitting. From that day on, Ethan became quieter about his progress. He stopped talking about goals. He stopped imagining a future version of himself. He focused on today. One morning. One habit. One choice. Months passed. Ethan's grades improved steadily. Not dramatically but consistently. Professors began to trust him. His parents noticed he was calmer, more present. But the biggest change was internal. When things got hard, Ethan no longer asked, "Do I feel like it?" He asked, "What does discipline require right now?" And then he did that. Slowly, without realizing it, Ethan stopped being the lazy young man who felt hopeless. He became someone who kept promises. Especially the ones he made to himself. Part 3. Time has a strange way of revealing change. For Ethan, the transformation didn't arrive with applause or dramatic moments. It arrived quietly, hidden in ordinary days. In mornings that no longer felt like a fight. In habits that felt almost automatic. In a sense of control he had never known before. 6 months had passed since the day he met Daniel on the bench. Ethan still woke up at 7 a.m. Not because he forced himself anymore, but because his body expected it. The alarm had become a backup, not a command. When he sat at his desk each morning, opened his book, and started his timer, there was a calmness in him. No rush, no panic. Discipline had stopped feeling like punishment. Felt like stability. One morning, as he closed his notebook, Ethan caught himself smiling. "Who are you?" he whispered, half joking, half amazed. The old Ethan would have laughed at this version of himself. The one who studied before checking his phone. The one who walked without headphones just to think. The one who showed up to class early and actually listened. But change brings responsibility. With improvement came expectations. One afternoon, Ethan was called into his academic advisor's office. Sitting across from her, he felt a familiar nervousness. But it didn't control him anymore. "I've been reviewing your progress," she said, scrolling through her screen. "Your grades have improved significantly." "Thank you," Ethan replied, his voice steady. She looked up at him. "Have you considered applying for the advanced program next semester?" The question stunned him. "That's for top students," Ethan said automatically. She smiled. "It's for disciplined students. And right now that's you." Ethan walked out of the office in a daze. Advanced program. 6 months ago he was afraid of being expelled. Now someone believed he could do more. That night doubt returned. Not the old doubt of failure, but a new one. What if I can't maintain this? He sat on his bed, staring at the wall, feeling the pressure slowly build in his chest. This time he didn't ignore it. He went for a walk. No phone. No music. Just movement. As he walked, Daniel's voice echoed in his mind. Discipline isn't about how much you can do. It's about how long you can stay consistent. Ethan exhaled. He wasn't required to be perfect. He was required to return. The next day he met Daniel again. They hadn't spoken as often lately. Not because Ethan didn't need him, but because he had learned to guide himself. I was offered a place in an advanced program, Ethan said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. And I'm scared, Ethan admitted. Daniel nodded. Good, Ethan repeated. Fear means you care, Daniel said. Just don't let it change your habits. Ethan smiled. You always make things sound simple. Daniel chuckled. Simple doesn't mean easy. That semester was the hardest one yet. The workload doubled. Expectations were higher. Deadlines were tighter. There were days when Ethan felt stretched thin, mentally exhausted, emotionally drained. But something important had changed. When he felt overwhelmed, he didn't quit. He adjusted. On days when 20 minutes felt impossible, he did 10. On days when walking felt tiring, he walked slower. On days when his mind felt scattered, he focused on one task only. He didn't abandon discipline. He adapted it. Late one evening, after finishing a long assignment, Ethan leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. His body was tired, but his mind was clear. I can handle hard things, he thought. That realization stayed with him. Not long after, something unexpected happened. A classmate named Ryan approached him after a lecture. Hey, Ryan said awkwardly. Can I ask you something? Sure, Ethan replied. How do you stay so focused? Ryan asked. You're always prepared. I'm drowning over here. Ethan almost laughed. If you only knew. He thought about it for a moment. I don't try to do everything, he said finally. I just do one small thing every day, even when I don't feel like it. Ryan frowned. That's it, Ethan said. That night, Ethan sat alone at his desk, the room quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock. He looked at his old sticky notes. Still saved in a drawer. Day 1. Day 2. Day 15 restarted. He held them in his hand and felt a wave of emotion rise in his chest. He hadn't changed because he became smarter. He had changed because he stopped negotiating with himself. The old Ethan believed motivation created action. The new Ethan understood that action created motivation. Months later, the results came in. Ethan had not only passed the advanced program, he had excelled. His parents were silent when he showed them the results. His mother's eyes filled with tears. His father pulled him into a quiet, awkward hug. We're proud of you, his father said, his voice thick. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. Later that night, he sat alone in his room, the same room that once felt like a prison. Now it felt like a place of growth. He opened his notebook and wrote a single sentence. Discipline didn't change my life overnight. Changed my direction. And for the first time, Ethan truly believed in the future he was walking toward. Part 4. Ethan's life began to feel fuller, not because it was easier, but because it was intentional. The days no longer slipped through his fingers unnoticed. Each one carried weight, meaning, and direction. Discipline had given him something he never had before: trust in himself. The advanced program pushed him harder than anything before it. There were weeks when deadlines overlapped, when sleep felt like a luxury, when his mind felt stretched to its limits. But instead of panic, Ethan leaned into structure. He planned his days the night before. Not detailed schedules, just simple priorities. One main task, one supporting task, one habit that anchored him. When stress rose, he returned to the basics. Wake up, study, sleep. Simple, grounded, reliable. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Ethan received a call from his mother. You sound tired, she said softly. I am, Ethan replied honestly. But It's a good kind of tired. He paused. I've never heard you say that before. Ethan smiled. Me neither. Not everything improved at once. Some friendships faded. Some people didn't recognize the quieter, more focused version of him. He no longer joined late-night hangouts or endless complaining sessions. And that was okay. He was no longer trying to escape his life. He was building it. One afternoon, Ethan ran into someone he hadn't seen in over a year, an old classmate who used to sit beside him during his worst days. Man, you look different, the classmate said, eyeing him up and down. What happened to you? Ethan thought about the question carefully. I stopped waiting, he said. Waiting for what? Feeling ready. The classmate laughed, confused. Ethan smiled politely and walked away. He didn't need validation anymore. The biggest test came unexpectedly. During finals week, Ethan received an email that shook him. Daniel had been hospitalized. The message was short. A mutual acquaintance had reached out. Nothing serious, they said. But serious enough. Ethan's chest tightened. That evening he went to the hospital. The smell of disinfectant hit him as soon as he walked in. He found Daniel sitting upright in bed, looking thinner but calm as ever. You look worried, Daniel said, smiling weakly. You didn't tell me, Ethan replied, pulling a chair closer. Daniel shrugged. Didn't want to distract you. Ethan swallowed. You're the reason I didn't quit. Daniel shook his head. No, I just showed you the door. You walked through it. They sat in silence for a while. Remember the bench? Daniel asked. Ethan nodded. I still go there. Daniel smiled. Good. One day, someone else will sit beside you. The words stayed with Ethan long after he left the hospital. Finals week was brutal. But Ethan didn't abandon his routines. He adjusted them. Shorter study blocks, slower walks, earlier sleep. He passed. Not with perfection but with pride. At the end of the semester, Ethan stood on campus, watching students rush by, just as he once had. But now he felt separate, not above them, not below them, just steady. He pulled out his phone and messaged Daniel. I finished strong. The reply came a few minutes later. I knew you would. That summer, Ethan took on a part-time job. Not because he needed the money urgently, but because he wanted responsibility. He woke up early. He showed up on time. He worked quietly, consistently. His manager noticed. You're reliable, she said one day. That's rare. Ethan nodded. He knew. One evening, while cleaning out his desk, Ethan found the original piece of paper Daniel had given him months ago. Tomorrow. Wake up at 7 a.m. Study for 20 minutes. That's it. He held it carefully like a fragile artifact. So much had grown from something so small. That night, Ethan sat at his desk and wrote a letter to himself. Not the old self he hated, but the one who was lost. He wrote about patience, about returning, about the power of small, boring actions done daily. He sealed the letter and placed it in a drawer. One day he would read it again. And one day he would tell someone else the same story. Not as a lecture, as proof. Final part. The morning sunlight fell gently across the campus, warm and familiar. Ethan stood near the same old bench, watching students pass by. Some walked quickly, eyes fixed on their phones. Others laughed loudly, carefree and unaware of how fast time moved. He recognized himself in them, in the lost expressions, in the distracted steps, in the quiet fear hidden behind casual smiles. A year ago he had been one of them. He sat down on the bench and let out a slow breath. Life hadn't become perfect. Problems still existed. Stress still visited. But something fundamental had changed. He trusted himself. That trust had been earned through hundreds of small, invisible decisions. Decisions no one applauded. Decisions no one posted about. Decisions that slowly built a different man. Ethan now lived in his own apartment. Nothing fancy. Just a small space that reflected his life. Clean, simple, intentional. Each morning he woke up early, made his bed, studied, worked and moved forward. not because he felt inspired but because discipline had become his language. One afternoon, as Ethan sat on the bench, someone approached him. "Mind if I sit here?" The voice was familiar. Ethan looked up and smiled. Daniel stood there, healthier now, standing taller than he had months ago. His eyes were calm, proud. "I was hoping I'd find you here," Daniel said, sitting down. Ethan laughed softly. "Seems like this bench has a habit of changing lives." Daniel nodded. "It does. When people are ready." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the world move around them. "You did well," Daniel said finally. Ethan shook his head. "I did the work." Daniel smiled. "Exactly." Few days later, something unexpected happened. Ethan was invited to speak at a small student orientation event. Nothing formal. Just a few minutes to talk to new students about adjusting to college life. Standing at the front of the room, Ethan felt his heart race. He looked at the faces in front of him, young, uncertain, hopeful. He took a breath. "I wasn't a good student," he began. "I was lazy. I avoided responsibility. I waited for motivation that never came." The room grew quiet. "I didn't change overnight," Ethan continued. "I didn't wake up inspired. I started with one small habit, one promise I could keep. Then I kept another." He paused, letting the words settle. "Discipline didn't make my life easy. It made it possible." When he finished, there was no loud applause. Just thoughtful silence. That was enough.